2, 6, 9, 19 and 21. James Olley at St James's Park. Are they last night's lottery numbers or the times of Newcastle's first 5 goals today?
Yeah, I mean, it must be the worst start to a Premier League game by any team in history. I've never seen anything like that. We've seen capitulations. We saw one a few weeks ago, and Manchester United lost 7-0 at Liverpool. But given the stakes here, and obviously 11v11 at kickoff, I've never quite seen a team be that abject, clueless, lost as Tottenham were in that opening 25 minutes. Astonishing. Obviously, they changed the system, went to a 4-3-3. It looked like they'd been told that 2 minutes before they walked out. They didn't seem to know who was supposed to be marking who. They didn't seem to know that there were no patterns of play. They didn't even really seem to know they kicked off. I mean, there's a nationwide emergency alarm test in the United Kingdom today, which went off. It went off at 3 o'clock. It was an hour too late for Spurs. I'm almost speechless, really, in terms of what I've seen from a professional football team to start a game like that. I mean, Stellini, we're sat about 3 rows behind the dugouts, and Stellini was absolutely shell-shocked at 3-0, 4-0, 5-0. I don't think he could believe what he was seeing.
Janusz, it was the first time in over a year Spurs had played with a back four in the Premier League. Why was it as bad as it was? James just spoke about it looked like they were told the formation a couple of minutes before kickoff. Is there one individual to blame? Is it a collective responsibility? Why?
Yeah, I mean, it's been, I think, 63 games. I looked it up. I think it was against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge where they lost 2-0 in that game. I mean, I suppose, when you have so many issues defensively, let's not forget that they're missing quite a few players, especially in the wide areas, right? So I can understand changing things up. But I think, a minute and 10 seconds in, that was a great indication of what was to come, right? Because Joelinton comes inside and basically deals with Porro, Højbjerg, Romero, who are just watching, and then Perisic falls asleep on the far post, right? So that tells you everything. I mean, system is one thing. The pride as a player, as a fight you should have is another thing. Mark, you and I were talking about it, I think, last week, and I remember telling you that Spurs were done. Psychologically, after that collapse against Bournemouth at home, I saw zero indication that Spurs can stay in the race. And it's deceptive, right? Because you look at 4th against 5th here, but Spurs have no business being in a Champions League run, right? I mean, if this is any different, I mean, you look at the table, I mean, they are in relegation form right now.
They're chasing a Champions League spot and they face Manchester United on Thursday. It's funny the way things are, James, because if they win that, and who can predict things in football anymore? We're at that stage of the season. If they win it, it's a huge surprise based on what we saw, Janusz mentioned, against Bournemouth and what we saw today. Is there a quick fix for Spurs? Because they've still got quality players middle to front.
Well, don't play a back four again. I think it's probably the first thing that Stellini will do. Look, I mean, it could get really toxic now at Tottenham. I mean, the fans away to my left here, they were chanting for Levy out inside 5 minutes, and this is a club that is just lost. It's lost all sense of direction, all sense of purpose. Yes, they could produce a performance that obviously got the individual quality to be able to do it. It seems as though these players only really know now how to play Conte's way. And given that you've got Conte's right-hand man in the dugout, for Christian Stellini, who has no real management experience, to try and put his own stamp on it. He's talked a lot in press conferences about trying to make them a more attacking unit. That went well today, didn't it? Trying to stamp his own authority on the team. They don't have the training time. They don't have they don't have the clarity of thought, I think, to try and implement something new at this stage of the season. I think what they've got to try and do is just go back to the best of what they could do under Antonio Conte, probably back to the 3-4-3. Look, Son, Kane and Kulusevski are 3 players who will give you a chance against anybody. I mean, the midfield today, just completely non-existent. I felt for Paquetá taken off after, what was it, 23 minutes, I think. Purely just to go back to that system. I felt for him, but that midfield without Bentancur is completely bereft of the kind of passing range that can give the kind of service that Son, Kane, and Kulusevski need, sort of early delivery to then go and cause problems to a team. Yeah, they're still in the shout. They're still in the hunt for a top four spot. But I mean, Newcastle have probably sealed third today, or certainly put distance enough between Newcastle and Tottenham to think that it's Newcastle and Manchester United alone to battle for that third spot. Spurs could still get fourth, but on that evidence, all right, they improved a little bit in the second half, but obviously the game's completely gone by then. The damage of confidence that this will give to these fragile players, and we all know how critical Conte was about them before he left, combined with the fact that, as I say, the fans here were already chanting against Daniel Levy 5 minutes into this. There's going to be a lot more of that on Thursday and in the games to come. If there's no clarity from above, they need a head coach appointment. They need to come and really explain where the direction of this club is now in the next sort of few weeks and months, because they are utterly lost at the moment, and this sort of thing is only going to continue until that clarity comes.
And I mean, how do trying to think how to simplify that, because it's stability against chaos, isn't it, right? And here's the thing about Conte, because I mean, the stability in Eddie Howe, who has a very good defensive structure for a manager that hasn't been known for defensive structure. If you look back to his ways at Bournemouth, right? He's learned. And here we are, because we're talking about Conte, quite the opposite, right? I mean, it should be two Italian managers who know each other well, right? I mean, they weren't great under Conte. This is a team that conceded 51 goals. I think Newcastle, 24, 25, right? And we're talking about Conte and his prowess in terms of organizing this team. So, I mean, he wasn't doing all that great, even in his 3 system. Yes, they weren't expensive. Yes, they were boring, especially at home, because they never took the game to the opposition. But even under Conte, they were poor defensively. And as I've mentioned today, I mean, Eric Dyer, please explain to me how he's an English international, and I don't want to be too hard on him. You look at Christian Romero, whom I like, and who was a World Cup winner, that doesn't know left from right. And what about Davinson Sanchez? Davinson Sanchez, I mean, this is Stellini's decision. In the game against Bournemouth, he substituted in and then substituted out, and he comes in to change the system today. And I know Langley kind of wasn't maybe 100%, but he was on the bench. Ben Davies was there. So it's just a massive, massive chaos that starts at the top. And I don't think that's fixable. As I said, I don't see any way that Spurs can even come close to that top 4, given what I've said about Bournemouth and this game today, having United ahead and United at home and Liverpool away.
James, if Harry Kane in any way was undecided before this game about his future, he's got a year left in his contract after the summer. If this is one of the results that means Spurs don't get top 4, could today have been nah, I'm not staying now. That was the final nail in the coffin. I can't stay at this football club.
I thought it was quite a nice sort of a moment that encapsulated that whole debate, actually, that, he scored that goal in the second half. It was sort of the lone star, if you like. Really nice goal, actually, beat Shah well, good low finish, and he edges towards another individual record, which is all he's got. It's all he has at Tottenham. Is just chasing these individual goal-scoring milestones. It's all he has. And he's 30 this summer. He's the England captain. He's clearly one of the best strikers in the world. Why on earth would he stay? What is there to stay for? He's already the club's all-time top goal scorer. He will break the Premier League record if he stays in England. He doesn't have to do that at Tottenham. Doesn't mean any less if he does it at another club. There's nothing here for him. There's no manager. There's no director of football. The owner is absent. There wasn't even a team in the first half. Mm-hmm. Why would he stay? Why would he stay? He already feels as though, remember that he already feels that promises have been broken. He thought he had a gentleman's agreement with Daniel Levy to leave 2 years ago when Manchester City tried to buy him. And, it's a measure of his professionalism and his character that he's knuckled down and he's got on with it. And he's never really complained about that. But he is a player who judges himself against Ronaldo and Messi. That's what he's done. Quite often in England, the English media are accused of being the ones that inflate those comparisons and make them prematurely. Harry Kane has done that himself all his career. He said, you go and watch the Amazon documentary with Tottenham. He says, I want to be judged against Ronaldo. I want to be judged against Messi. Some of his numbers, I mean, look, those two are obviously on another level in terms of the goal scoring feats. But Kane's consistency over several seasons is sort of in that ballpark, but he's won nothing. He's got nothing to show for it. He is somebody who wants trophies. He wants silverware at the end of his career. He's not happy to just plod along being a one-club man. And he's done everything he possibly could have done to get Spurs to that level. He's shown way more loyalty than many other players would have done in his situation. But what is there left for him now? There's nothing.
Janusz,
He has to go. There's no reason that he would stay.
And if there is, then he'll be the one to tell us, but I'm not holding my breath. Janusz, we've spent 10 minutes talking about a team that have lost by 6-1. And that's going to be the headlines. It's going to be the headlines on ESPN FC. It's going to be the headlines in the morning paper. That is the story. The team that won 6-1 deserves so much praise. The team that were 5-0 up after 21 minutes with some fantastic goals. The through ball, I think it was for the fourth, was just scintillating. So it's time for a bit of a love-in now, not between the three of us, but between you two, talking about Newcastle, their performance, what Eddie Howe's done, and how they just blew Spurs away, Janusz, in the first 20 minutes.
Yeah, nothing has changed. I think we've been talking about this Newcastle team for a long time. They had that soft spell. Everybody does it in the Premier League. That happened when Bruno Guimaraes was out, remember? I mean, they fit number of draws and maybe a loss as well. We saw how wonderful he's been. He's got a number of leaders there. You saw Fabian Schär, again, absolutely wonderful. See Alexander Isak, for whom they had to wait and who had to confirm how good of a striker he is. There's so much talk about Newcastle needing a number 9. They have a number 9. They'll probably need to add to it anyway, right? Because they're building for a number of competitions next season.
I'm doing a live thing here.
But I think, if you look at it as a whole, they've been tremendous. If you look at Murphy, you look at Willock, as you've mentioned, wonderful pass, and they've been tremendous. Joelinton changing his role, playing in the midfield, can play in the front as well today. Again, wonderful. I mean, there isn't one player that had an off game. Add to it Kieran Tierney, not Tierney. Why am I? Kieran Trippier, who maybe, in my opinion, was the most important transfer that they've made. Not only because he's the captain, but the way he organizes everything. Came from Atletico Madrid. Obviously, has learned even more discipline under Diego Simeone as well. So I think there's just tweaks. I mean, even somebody like Longstaff, right? I mean, how much better has he gotten under Eddie Howe? I mean, it's been absolutely tremendous. It's almost as if that midfield doesn't function the same without him. He just came back in this game, and again, absolutely wonderful. So I think Newcastle have done it in a smart way. They've had all the money in the world, but they've decided to put down a foundation for what's to come. They didn't just go out there to buy any players, big names, spend a lot of money. I think that that's what I've mentioned. I think, to me, it's just stability against chaos, and that's the way to build a football club. And you know what? Everybody knows they deserve it up there.
James, Newcastle are what Chelsea should have been. Loads of money, but absolutely no stability at Stamford Bridge. That's another argument for another day, why Chelsea are where they are, why they didn't follow the Newcastle model. But Janusz has got a point. This is someone, the owners, that could have come in and just splashed the cash, but they decided to strengthen the defence, a bit like Cloughy used to do with Peter Shilton. They've got a good goalkeeper. They've got an excellent defence. Do they have the squad? Janusz touched on it there. Do they have the squad to compete in multiple competitions next season, likely the Champions League? And if they don't, where do you think they need to add so they've got strength and depth everywhere, James?
Well, this is the next phase of their development, isn't it? I mean, they are, if they finish in the top 4, they're ahead of schedule, undoubtedly. I don't think anybody had them finishing the Champions League this season. And you're right, it is a testament, I think, to Spurs appointed Conte and then went short of backing him wholeheartedly. They had one foot in, one foot out. Newcastle haven't done that. They've appointed Eddie Howe, who wasn't necessarily the sexiest name that was linked with this club at the time, but they've adopted a more methodical approach, safety first, if you like, or it's foundations first. In terms of, the best defensive record in the Premier League. It's remarkable, really. if they qualify for the Champions League, as it increasingly looks like they will do, they will have to strengthen, though. They won't have the one game a week, the time to recover, that obviously they're benefiting from this season. I think the fullbacks are probably an obvious area, as good as Kieran Trippier is. You've got Dan Burn playing left back today. I know that there's a specific tactical reason why they tend to do that, but you don't see that being sustainable. They've got Matt Target, they probably need to upgrade in that area. Look, in Isak, they've got a very exciting player. I think they probably should strengthen, maybe in midfield. You'd want a little bit more creativity in there alongside Guimaraes. But it's not major surgery. It's more a case of making sure that their best 11 is as fresh for the biggest games as can be. You look at the drop-off, and actually really Spurs are another good example of it. You look at the drop-off, Tottenham's best 11 is okay. Not great, but it's okay. Defensively, it's still vulnerable. That's another conversation. But the drop-off is quite marked, and that's really where Newcastle have to look now, is to think, well, how interchangeable are 3, 4, 5 players if we want to make multiple changes, which we're going to need to play 3 games a week for the whole of next season.
Janusz, final question to you. James has just spoken about Newcastle, probably overachieved as far as their timescale of development is concerned by doing so well this season. I'm not going to sit here and say, well, when can Newcastle win the league? But what do they have to do, as well as the squad adjustments that James has just mentioned, to go from where they are now? Because they didn't spend all that money just to finish in the Champions League every year. They spent all that money ultimately to try and be a title contender. How far away are they from being considered at the start of the season as, Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool, Man United, and Newcastle as a kind of group of 5 among maybe others, rather than, Newcastle are probably best of the rest?
I think the most important thing for Newcastle United will be to maintain the top 4 status, because as James has mentioned, I mean, they're way ahead of schedule, and I'm hoping that the expectations are not going to be too high, because as good as this season has been, we see a little bit of a drop off. Right, Manchester United has done a great thing in picking a great leader in there, Ten Hag. They're going to be stronger. They're going to want to fight for the trophies. Chelsea's off. Liverpool are off. Manchester City are going to be Manchester City. That's not going to change. Arsenal is probably going to strengthen. They're going to fight. So I think it's going to be a much, much tougher season for Newcastle and for everybody else as well. So I wouldn't go as far as saying, okay, if they get 2 or 3 of those players, and James mentioned perfect positions, I think in the center of the pitch, somebody to maybe, when Bruno Guimaraes is not available, to kind of be at that same level, but I don't think 2 or 3 players are going to change it, and we're going to be sitting here ahead of next season saying Newcastle United are fighting for the top spot or to win the league. They may very well do that, but I just think the expectations are a funny thing. And right now, if I were them, I just want to make sure to stabilize this team even more and make sure they're always part of that top 4. After that, every year, every transfer window, you had a player or 2. And depending on how all the other teams are doing, there may be an opportunity. There may be a window for Newcastle United to ask a question. If they continue defensively as they are right now, that's massive, because, maybe I'm biased being a defender, but I just think that you need to have that stability, and they have already plenty of going forward.
Thanks to Janusz. Thanks to James. Spurs will get all the headlines following this one, but it's Newcastle that get all 3 points, winning the first set 6-1.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.